It's Wednesday. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee on tech. Every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, SCWA turns our Facebook page over to a new writer to talk about their work and their books. So take a break, grab a cup of coffee, and join us today as we welcome Dete Meserve. Dete is a film and television creator and producer, as well as a best-selling and award-winning novelist. Meserve is the author of Good Sam, Perfectly Good Crime, and The Good Stranger. I see a theme here, Dete. Lots of goods here. A mystery series that explores the ways we can do good for others. Her first novel, Good Sam, is now a Netflix original film starring Tia Sircar. Is that correct?
Right.
The Good Place. She is also the author of a suspense thriller, The Space Between, which is being adapted as a film. Her first nonfiction book, Random Acts of Kindness, is a collection of true stories about people changing the world through kindness. Meserve is at work writing Random Acts of Kindness as a feature film, as well as working on a new novel. Well, we could use some of those messages. Welcome, Dete.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk today because, as you pointed out, there's a lot of good in my books. And I don't mean that from a quality standpoint, but because they're novels about the search for good. I want to take you back to before I was a novelist, before I was doing any pen to paper writing, but definitely not thinking about the novel form. I was an avid reader, like probably a lot of people. And I was reading novel after novel, and I'm, of course, love the mystery genre. And I kept wondering, why are we reading about serial killers and kidnappers and rapists and people who are doing violence to each other? We get it. There's going to be a moment there where there's going to be, the justice served. But for me, there was the whole time you're spending in that novel, in that story, trying to think like a serial killer or a kidnapper, trying to imagine why they did it, how they did it, are they going to get away with it? And I wondered whether or not that was actually good for us, because we're spending so much time in the heads of people who are, one, incredibly rare in this world, and they may give us the impression that they're far more evil people than there are. But two, was really making me think about, what about all the people who are doing extraordinary good? So I started to write my very first novel. It's called Good Sam, which is now a Netflix original film. And the book looks like this. And it's a story about a reporter who has seen everything, all the things, especially here in LA or in big cities, which you hear about in the news: violence, tragedy, incredible cruelty. And she gets assigned to a story about a man who's leaving $100,000 on a stranger's doorstep. So when I say a man, it's a complete stranger. She doesn't know if it's a man or a woman. And she feels like she has been sacked, given the worst story of the year. Where is the story in that? And so she goes to seek out this good Samaritan, this good Sam, and finds out the mystery behind his cash gifts. And the story itself is really about looking for good. It's using the same things, the same tropes, the same story ideas that we might use for a mystery, but we're trying to understand, who is this person and why might they have done it? And of course, there's somebody who claims that they're Good Sam and seems to have all of the right reasons, seems to really engage all the readers and viewers of his story. And Kate starts to believe that maybe this person isn't the real Good Sam. So she really has to seek out truth. This was my very first novel. And I have to say that when I wrote it, I showed it to some very close friends, and people that love me and care about me, but they don't always give you the best advice. One person said, Dee, it's a beautiful story, but no one's going to want to ever read a book about somebody doing good. Like maybe after they get the $100,000 cash, like maybe somebody murders them or something. And I was like, that's not the book I want to write. And I knew right then and there I was either going to have to stand for what other people said the market wanted or what I believed in. And at that point, I really stood firmly on, I'm going to rather fail on something I believe in than succeed on something I don't. And those are really important words for me in my journey as an author. So I didn't change it. And then I decided, because I didn't want to go through the process of getting an agent and then finding a traditional publisher. I had a full-time job as a producer, film and television producer, as well as 3 kids. And that seemed like a really, really long journey. And so I had said, oh, you know what, I'm going to just self-publish this. And that's where well-meaning friends also came to me and said things that came from their heart, but really weren't the right answer for me either. One friend said, look, I did it too, Dete, and I sold less than 50 copies. And she's a very well-known producer and writer in television. I thought, oh boy, if that's happening to her, maybe this isn't a great idea. Another friend brought up an author that I know really, really well and that I admire. And he said, you know, so-and-so who you love, he only sells 2,500 books and he's that famous. And why are you trying to think that you can possibly self-publish this? And there were many people along that journey who kept saying this was a mistake. And I, again, kept thinking, I'd rather fail on what I believe in than succeed on what I don't. So 6 months after that, I released the book and was very surprised. Within a few weeks, it started hitting on many of the bestseller lists, in particular Christian fiction. Not because Christian fiction has a hold on all things good, but because that's a place where a book like this would get a lot of attention given the name, Good Samaritan, Good Sam. And then it started hitting in literary fiction, contemporary fiction. And within a little over a year, I had sold 100,000 copies. And that's when the traditional publisher started calling and agents started reaching out. And that's when everything really changed. For me, it really wasn't about that success though, because I had something I really, really wanted to say, which is that there's far more good out there than any of us really give our attention to. And a story like The Good Samaritan may not be, it's fiction, but there are true stories of people doing acts, kind acts, big and small, changing the world. So on my social media platform, I began finding those people. I have to say, as a journey as a writer, that has probably been one of the most fulfilling aspects of writing, because then I became the champion, the light for what they were doing. It could be a kid that's doing a lemonade stand, raising money for the homeless, to somebody extraordinary giving up a kidney for a student. It could be everything in between, young, old, rural, city, every kind of person using their creativity and ingenuity. And so the idea for actually a nonfiction book started coming, and I'll only touch briefly on that, but that became the book Random Acts of Kindness. It's true stories. I wrote it with journalist Rachel Greco. These are true stories of Good Samaritans. And I wanted to prove that thesis, if you will, that this was happening everywhere, all around us. Anywhere you looked, if you spent a moment, you could find good. So that really became for me kind of a mission, and continues to be a mission. I wrote a second book in the Good series. You mentioned Perfectly Good Crime, and maybe I'm just too good. I gave away my last copy, so I don't have one to show. But Perfectly Good Crime was the second in the series. And in this book, Kate Bradley, again, comes back as a reporter, and she's looking into a series of very high-profile burglaries. And they're burglaries of some of the richest estates in America, many of them here in Southern California, homes that are 150 million or more in value. And she looks at it first as a crime story, and then uncovers the possibility that these crimes have more uplifting motives. So really, without spoiling anything about the story, it was me looking at a different kind of good, a good that takes care of those who are disabled, the elderly, the poor, the people who need it most, and really asks a lot of questions about whether that's right or not. I know I'm being a little vague. I don't want to spoil the story for you, but Perfectly Good Crime to me was a way of looking at good in a different way, of taking care of those people who are most vulnerable in our society. In the process, after I wrote Perfectly Good Crime, I started talking to different people about making Good Sam as a movie. And initially, many of you know this because if you look it up, you'll see that it was originally a Hallmark movie written by a wonderful writer named Tina Booth. And Hallmark wanted to make it as a Christmas movie, had greenlit it, announced it to everyone, and we were all about ready to go and do what producers do to make this movie when they changed their mind and felt like maybe it might be better not as a Christmas movie, but as a movie in mystery. And during that time, their rights to the movie actually expired. And I took another look at the movie and said, is this really saying what I wanted to say? Other people think it does. But I felt it was missing something critical. And that was something in Good Sam that was essential to me as the author, which is that you may have someone who's claiming to be Good Sam and they have all the right words and they have all the right charisma and they have everything going for them. But the truth is actually more silent. The people that are carrying truth are not the loudest, not necessarily the most charismatic. And the truth may be hidden inside that. And there's not an equivalent. Somebody who gives to someone because they want the attention and the notoriety, and someone who gives without expecting anything in return, in my book, are just absolutely not the same. So I rewrote the script. And again, a summer where I was writing another novel for my publisher in the midst of a lot of other things personally and professionally, and in the midst of a very large production, 2 seasons of a show at the same time. And I said, I'm going to rewrite this so that it is something that really reflects that difference. And that's when we took it into Netflix. Netflix loved it. And within a year, we were making that movie. And it's now available for anybody who has Netflix to watch. Of course, it's called Good Sam. And I wrote that screenplay. And a lot of people ask me, well, why would you take time? You're so busy. Like, why would you take time to write that screenplay? And I was like, the same thing. I would rather fail on what I believe in than succeed on what I don't. And I felt that Good Sam, the movie I wrote, really separated the person who's just doing good things to look good and the person who's doing good things because they know it's who they are and it's what's going to make the world a better place. And it's an expression of themselves. So that became for me very empowering to keep following that. In the middle of doing Good Sam, the movie, I know my time is just about to run out. I'll just say that I was asked to write the 3rd book in the series that became The Good Stranger, which just came out in January. This is June of 2020. And the last thing I'll say about that is that I had a publishing contract and was in the midst of making a movie on set there in Canada and had no idea what I was going to write. None, absolutely none. Until one of the directors that we were considering ultimately weren't able to engage him. He said, you know, Kate Bradley never really does find a real good Samaritan, someone who's just giving to people they don't know for no reason. They don't know if they're rich, they're poor, they need it or not. And that became something that stuck in my mind day after day as I'm sitting on the set hearing, Kate Bradley's voice, performed by T.S. Sarkar, living in that world. And I realized, oh, there's a real story in giving to complete strangers. And it's living all around me and it's happening all the time. And so The Good Stranger, Kate Bradley goes to New York thinking she's going to be covering all the great important stories in politics. Remember, she's a senator's daughter, and maybe crime and justice. And she uncovers a group that is literally plotting thousands and thousands of acts of kindness for complete strangers throughout Manhattan. So she has to find out who's behind it, why they would be doing it. And that's the story behind it. And for me, that kind of completes the trilogy there. People have asked me if I'm going to write something more. I'm actually moving on to something more in the suspense thriller, but I never can get very far from telling stories of good. So I know I'll be back doing that sometime soon.
Well,
but thank you so much.
Well, we're excited that you will be, and I'm hoping that you'll share something with us. I know we're running over time, but I think this is worth it. So when you were writing your first book, did that idea come to you? Was the message first or the story first? Did you say, oh, this is a great story about, the mystery behind who does this, and then in that is the message? Or did the message come and did you have to come up with the story to fit the message? Wait, oh, this is where it gets good. And how did you balance the message with the actual story?
That's a really, really good question, Maddie. And I appreciate you asking it because I started with sort of a message, right? And then I didn't know who could tell that story. And oddly enough for me, I was very good friends at the time with a news reporter at KNBC. And I saw how she would, sit down and tell me every terrible thing that ever happened in LA. And I was like, wow, that's a completely different perspective than I have, who's not doing news every single day of my life, right? And I thought, that's a perfect person who has access to a lot of people and has a point of view about the world and how it's shaped. And so that started to define it. I didn't have the idea of who the Good Samaritan was. Who would that be? I had no idea. And I will just say, without spoiling it for people, that I was lucky enough to meet a battalion chief of the LA County Fire Department and hear some amazing stories of how they put themselves on the line for people day in and day out, for complete strangers. And I thought, I think I have the beginnings of characters here. Now, what's that story? And how do I make that story something authentic to what I'm trying to do, but also somewhat commercial? So there's, of course, a love story in there too. No one wants to read, somebody just telling a message. I really wanted to carry that message on a story that was exciting to me, but that's how it came about.
Well, I think anybody who's looking for something that's uplifting, a story that's uplifting, that has it all, would be very happy to get a hold of Good Sam. So we have Good Sam, The Good Stranger, and Perfectly Good Crime, right?
Right. And they go Good Sam, Perfectly Good Crime, and Good Stranger, but I wrote them deliberately that they could be read standalone. This is not like a series where, oh, I didn't know this happened, so I'm going to be confused. This is really looking at good in three separate ways, and you can read them in any order. Some people are just purists and like to start with Good Sam. That's fine too. But there's been plenty of readers who just picked up The Good Stranger and then go, oh, I got to read the rest of these. You certainly won't be reading them and feeling bad about the world. If anything, I hope it encourages people to go out and do some good in the world themselves.
Well, that's great. That's a great message in itself. Also, you can watch the movie. So where can people find your books, Dete?
So all of the books, of course, are available on Amazon. My publisher is Lake Union Publishing, so all of the ebooks are only available on Amazon. The paperbacks are available anywhere. Easiest thing is just to go to my website, which has links for everything, or just type in my unusual name into Amazon, and there's only one Dete Meserve, and you'll see all of my books there too as well. So that's the easiest thing.
Okay, we're also going to put links to your book and to your website in the show notes. So anybody who's listening, you could go to the show notes and find that information. Dete Meserve, thank you so much for being here with us today and lifting our spirits and giving us something to look forward to. That's always a great way to start the day. So best of luck to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my great pleasure to talk to all of you and to see you again, Maddie. Thank you again.
Okay, Dete, and everyone watching, if you enjoyed this bookshot, if you'd like to see more like it, please go to the Southern California Writers Association Facebook page, or you can go to our YouTube channel, which is SCWA Writers Online. So until next week at, I guess, Wednesday at 10 a.m., we will see you soon and stay safe.